Hello, good morning, friends. Today we have Professor Deepshikha with us. Today she will tell us about how to measure peace and is it different from measuring conflict. Professor Deepshikha, it's so nice to have you around.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
we are very eager to hear from you. Your idea of measurement of peace and conflict. People are waiting to hear from you.
Thank you, Dr. Nutan, for this honor. Yes, when it comes to measuring peace, most of the time people think, or most of the definitions of peace says absence of war or absence of conflict. And it is being measured in terms of absence of conflict
Mhm.
only. But if we look at it, it is not absence of conflict, it is much more than that.
Right.
A lot of
Mm.
researches have already been conducted in this area.
Mhm.
Because if it would have been the absence of conflict, then the countries like Sweden, we
Mhm.
consider them as peace countries. But are they
Yes.
actually peaceful? Because it involves a lot of other parameters in terms of how good you are able to exercise your rights, how good your relationships are with the neighbors, how good your citizens feel safe while staying there.
That's true.
So, if I talk about measurement of peace, it is measured in terms of as a situation,
Mhm.
as an idea, and
Okay.
as a relationship. There are three parameters broadly which are defined worldwide to measure peace.
Okay.
Initially, it was measured as a dictomous
Hmm.
part,
Mhm.
dictomous parameter,
Hmm.
yes or no. Yeah, either there is peace or there is
Hmm.
no peace. But later on, Professor Davenport gave a very good research whereby he defined that peace is a continuum.
Oh, yes.
Continuum, and you can measure it on various scales,
Mhm.
and the continuum varies from 1 to 10. And considering his research only, today the International Institute of Economics and Peace,
Mhm.
they have developed their own global peace index.
Right.
Considering
GPI.
23 parameters, they have taken 23 parameters, and on that 23 parameters, they every year measure that which country ranks first in terms of global peace index, in terms of global terrorism,
Mhm.
in terms of positive peace.
Okay.
Now the concept comes, what is positive peace?
Exactly.
When it was a dictomous concept,
Mhm.
then normally people used to say positive peace or negative peace.
Right. Right.
So absence of conflict is actually negative peace.
That's true. Yes.
That is negative
Yes.
peace.
Yes.
Real sense of measurement of peace is measurement of positive peace, and that what this IEP is doing on. And this year again, 2024 data, if you will look at, there are 97 countries which have
Right.
gone down in the
Yeah.
peace index just because negative peace is there. But when
That's
it comes
true.
to positive peace, their position, their ranks have gone down.
Mhm.
So 97 countries is a big number.
Right. It is.
And
Yes.
broadly, the factors which have affected is the Gaza conflict, the Ukraine-Russia war.
Yes.
It's more of the geopolitical relationship,
Across the border.
yes, the strenuous relationships between the various countries, their governments, which has resulted into decline in the peace index,
Right.
their ranking in the peace index. Another is the human capital there.
Right.
Over the years, we have seen that there are countries where there is a lot of migration of a skilled labor.
Right.
Uh, Means they are having a brain gain also, and they are having immigration from different parts of the world. That's why their human capital is rising, and
Right.
they're rising in peace index also. But there are certain nations where the brain drain is going on.
That's true.
And
Yes.
because of this brain drain, they are moving down the peace index.
It's like demographic dividends are going lower
Yes,
on one side.
yes.
And many countries are suffering even because they don't have enough people actually around.
Yes, they
So-
don't have that intellectual capital which can think about in terms of positive and negative
Yes.
peace, which can think about that how to, because when you have lack of intellectual capital, you are skeptical in sharing your thoughts also. You are skeptical in sharing with
Yes.
others. And because they are not sharing with other parts of the world, so we are still not able to define one single standard scale for measuring the peace.
It's very beautiful what you've just now said, because when I was referring to peace, I was looking at Maslow's need hierarchy.
Yes.
And at the base of the pyramid is insecurity, which you just now mentioned,
Yes.
that people are not secure about sharing. Whereas the next hierarchy, less level, if I look at only 3 levels of Maslow's hierarchy, the next level is social bonding, acceptance, respect, awards, rewards, recognition. So if people are not connected to each other, they would be wary of sharing.
Yes, that's what is required. Sharing of notes, sharing of intellectual capital across the border is required. Among the governments is required.
Right.
So that suppose a particular government has adopted a way to bring peace in their nation, they should share it with other countries how they have done it, so that they can follow it.
Yes.
But as you have rightly mentioned, the Maslow's law, and yes, because you are insecure, that's why you are not sharing. Because you are not sharing, the social bonds are less. Because the social bonds are less, the human capital is not performing up to the mark. So self-esteem needs are also not getting fulfilled.
Very much, yes. And that's why. So I think when we talk about economics of peace, and there are when we mentioned that people are moving from one location, one geography to the other geography, because their skills are not being used either, or their skills are not valued. So it is an economic question for them. And if on the other hand, on the reverse side, on the positive side, if we look at that, the host country is valuing their skills, and they are growing in their own home ground, then the causes of the chances of conflict will be lower.
Yes.
And so peaceful societies would have this one of the indicators, that at home ground itself, they are giving lots of opportunities to their youth, and they are retaining the brain, or maybe sharing, as you said, sharing with other countries. Not entirely, it is not directional, that from one place to the other, they just leave the one place and go to the other. Is that also kind of magnified into
Yes, if you will talk about countries like Cuba, earlier they were totally communist economy, totally closed economy, I would say. And closed, they have not opened their borders for others. The scenarios were different there. The people were not enjoying their stay there.
Yes.
Because totally closed. From the time they have opened their borders, they have started export and import with US and some other nations. Things have changed there. So definitely you will have to exchange ideas, you'll have to exchange knowledge, you'll have to, and yes, in this world of technology, AI can play a very important role.
That's true.
A lot of data is available. That data could be analyzed. So exactly how it will be done, that is still a question mark.
Yes.
Still, I can't comment on it, but I am damn sure, and I'll say 100% sure, that AI will definitely come up with a lot of new models which could be used to bring peace or to sustain peace in the world.
Very much. I agree with you so much. Actually, in Sweden, Oslo, there is one research that happened wherein they are able to map the armed conflict across the world, and they are trying to see how peace can build and what are the precursors of conflict, so that they can contain it before it starts. There's also an organization, actually this is also a result of research by a professor, I think in the USA. So he has a website with his research project and his assistants, what you mentioned about AI and real-time mapping of what is happening where. So they have a website, and that is where you can see which area is in trouble and what's going on there.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm sure some technology is applied there, but at the same time, I have a question also, that if this analysis of conflict is measured in real time by a software or the use of technology, and the data is available, there is a data set, the huge data set available for anybody to look at, then is it that somewhere there is a thought process going where they can project the data also? That tomorrow, where is it that we are going to have conflict?
Definitely. Artificial intelligence can very well help us, or to project the regional integrations in future. The regional intelligence, what we talk about, and if one has a sense of regional intelligence and one knows about that how the people in different regions will behave and what kind of equations going on, what kind of geopolitical relationships going on, definitely conflicts and peace could be projected for future. Very well it could be projected, because we already have models, we already have
Case studies of
case
peaceful
studies,
societies.
then a lot of operation research models are there when it
Right.
comes to game theory.
Right.
When game theory can very well be applied to project these conflicts or these peace initiatives, or what all countries will be in peace or will be able to attain peace in the coming future.
That reminds me of Malthus population theory. So I remember sometime back, sometime back means 30 years back, there was a kind of a gathering and people were questioning, oh my God, India has such a lot of population. What is going to happen, you know? So I was there, comparatively young person at that time. So I thought, no, India's population is not a kind of a challenge, rather it is a strength. And the population itself is going to prop the economy in the long term. But yet, Malthus principle also says that available resources, grow in a kind of a constant. It has a kind of a direction. But the population grows exponentially, like in a J-shaped curve. So there will be a cross somewhere, and that point of cross where the population is increasing very high, but the resources are going on its own pace or maybe decreasing for the given population. That's the point. That's the X section where the conflict will arise because of the shortage of resources, and it might that kind of a shortage and conflict or what you call kind of deprivation might lead to conflict and war.
See, distribution of resources have always been the reason for conflict in nations.
Yes.
And in a country like India, where you have such a diverse population and population rising exponentially,
right.
Every country has limited resources.
Resources
Optimization of those resources is difficult, and there is always a dilemma in front of the government that whether to adopt a socialistic approach or to adopt a capitalistic approach. Why? Because if I talk in terms of economics, if they adopt that equitable distribution of resources, then the people or the organizations, those who are performing better, they are not motivated because they are getting the same what others are getting. So their motivation goes down. Same with the humans, labor working there. And if they adopt an approach that the one who is performing better should have more access to resources and the other should have lesser, then poor becomes more poorer and the rich become more. So there is always a dilemma, and that is the reason that today the whole world talks about that a mixed approach is the best approach.
So Professor Deepshikha, you have touched a very, very deep point here, because the other day I was just reading a saying, and the saying said that justice is not natural. You know, it is a man-made phenomena. So I was just wondering that what is natural? Natural is the natural selection and the survival of the fittest. The Darwinist approach. And if justice is artificial, that means it is also the ethical and value connected issue that human beings are capable of thinking of. So when there is no equality or equilibrium is disturbed, that means justice is lacking somewhere, because the person who is not getting the benefit will feel that justice is not there.
See, no, you have taken it in a different direction. The point is whether we want to distribute it equally, a socialistic approach, just like USSR earlier used to have. That is a different model, that the government controls all the resources and then government divides equally to all. This you are talking about is that we have adopted an approach like a capitalistic, but someone is getting, someone is not, or the government wants to distribute, but government is getting biased. Then the justice comes into picture. But if, yes, we have, I'm talking in terms of equitable resources
we
distribution.
We would all like to, yeah.
Yes, but again, the world has given us a lot of cases, and we have also witnessed that in socialistic approaches, the developments are lesser. Human development index is lesser. Standards of living are lesser. You tend to get better technology better products once you have capitalistic model also. Because only then that motivation for innovation always remains with the entrepreneur. Otherwise, that entrepreneur thinks that I'll be whatever extra I'll be earning, government will take it. So that motivation goes down.
So Ayn Rand also said something like, when I was reading The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, it was like people who had abundance, and when that abundance was being shared, they had to live a life which they thought was a less quality life. So it was something like spreading the butter too thin, a law of average kind of a thing. But on the other hand, if the same abundant person thinks that, okay, let me share what I have extra, like the buffet, like he kind of shares his richness, calculating that he will be fine in that much amount. So that's a social welfare kind of a mindset.
Exactly.
So I think somewhere in this crisscross of social welfare, socialist and capitalist, we need
now
to find a sweet
picked
point.
up the right point that if you adopt a capitalistic model and a model where you give the resources as per the people are performing, then yes, those who are performing better, they need to invest back to the society, because their businesses are growing because of the society.
Giving back to the
so
society.
You need to give back to the society. So here I would like to take the example of Indian government. Yes, worldwide people are now saying that we have the best model of economics in terms of mixed economy, because there are certain resources, certain areas where our government is controlling. There are certain areas, sectors where there is private sectors are controlling. So it's a very good mix we have developed. Another thing, the government has made 2% mandatory to be invested in CSR by all the organizations having a turnover of around 100 crores. So that's a very good move by the government.
And being a big country, a big population, it
because
really helps.
It's somewhere down the line is a step towards bringing equality, bringing equitable distribution of resources for the people, and bringing that peace aspect, which will definitely lead to peace, because once a human being is satisfied, they are at peace.
It's beautiful. Actually, I would say that there was a very interesting observation that whenever the rest of the world was experiencing a crisis, and the economy was it was downturning, we saw in India there was a kind of a cushion, and everybody was surprised that a country like India, it's not suffering as much as other countries were. So some people were talking to each other, and we realized that it is because of the family structure that we have. People help each other. There is a cushion, and people are not abundant. So there is an assurance that somebody will look after them through thick and thin. And that is what the government of India does, and that is why it is a very good example for the rest of the world.
If you look at, go back down the lane during the COVID times. The whole world was talking about the crisis. Most of the nations, I'll not say whole world, most of the nations in the world were talking about crisis.
Like India was being watched.
There were news that the thefts have increased. There were news that people are snatching. But did it happened in India? No. Just because we have very good social bonds. And that's what I mentioned earlier in our discussion, that social bonds also play a very important role in bringing peace to a nation.
That's true.
So strong social bonds are required. Again, one step taken by our government through NEP, that they have tried to imbibe Indian knowledge system, Indian systems of generating those social bonds, the kind of family structure we have, that through NEP, they are teaching to kids, they are teaching to youth, and brought up a lot of new avenues so that these social bonds get stronger and the peace remains in the country.
Thank you so much to share your thoughts. And I would say that ultimately, a conflict has to be addressed internally in your heart. That you have to have the self-confidence of your own knowledge, places where you belong. You have to water your own roots. That is when you will be able to support others and stand up as an example for the rest of the world about how to resolve conflict. And when there is conflict, how to reduce it amicably, considering both the sides, not only your own side. So there has to be a paradigm shift in how we look at peace and how we resolve conflict. Thank you very much, Professor
Thank you.
Deepshikha. It was a wonderful discussion, and I hope and I wish that it goes on and on, and we have
Yes,
many more such
I was
episodes.
actually enjoying this discussion a lot, and if there would not have been time constraint, it would have gone
Let's
further.
make a series of it then.
Thank you. You also added a lot of very good points, and thank you so much for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity.
It was a great
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.